The alien champion, who never surrendered, forfeited the moment. This human engineer entered the arena. The Veyron Colosseum was a furnace of brutality and pageantry, its obsidian floor polished to a mirror sheen that did nothing to erase the scent of sweat and alien ichor ground deep into the cracks. Floodlights burned overhead, casting jagged shadows and setting the crowd ablaze in a spectrum of neon and holographic banners. Marcus watched from the maintenance alcove, pressed back into the gloom, fingers absently tracing the edge of his tool case as the next contest unfolded. Sereth, Drakari champion, the Syndicate's unbeaten weapon, moved across the arena with predatory grace. Each step she took sent ripples through her iridescent scales, the colors shifting from teal to violet to midnight blue, mesmerizing in the shifting light. Her slender, humanoid frame seemed made for the Colosseum's violence, yet she moved with an elegance that was almost hypnotic. Her amber eyes, slit-pupilled and predatory, swept the crowd with cold detachment. The frilled crest at her neck flared, brief as a gasp, when the audience thundered their approval at her victory, but her angular face never softened. She accepted neither the glory nor the violence, only the necessity of both. As the roar faded and the body of her latest challenger was dragged away, Marcus felt the familiar ache in his chest, the mingling of awe and something harder to name. He collected his tools and slipped away, the echoes of the crowd still thrumming through his bones. Later, his wristcom flickered with an unfamiliar code. A summons. Sereth's quarters. Marcus stared at the message, heart thudding, knowing what privilege and peril such a call could bring to a syndicate tech. He hesitated at the threshold of her chamber, a place of cool shadows and filtered air, tinged with a mineral tang, sharp and electrifying. The room was spare, almost monastic, but alive with the subtle presence of its occupant. Sereth stood by the viewport, her back to him, outlined against the blue shimmer of city lights far below. Her battle gear was gone, replaced by a simple slate-gray wrap that left her arms and the strong lines of her shoulders bare. Her scales, muted now in the low light, caught the occasional glint as she shifted. She did not turn as he entered. "The neural relay in the training hall is glitching," she said, her voice a low, melodic rasp that vibrated with a restrained energy. Marcus crossed to the console, every movement measured and careful. "Yes, champion," he replied, masking his nerves behind the neutrality of protocol. He crouched at the access panel, fingers flying over the sensors, aware of her silent watchfulness. He could feel her presence behind him, a weight, a question, the press of something unsaid. When he glanced up, he caught the shimmer of her scales and the unblinking focus of her gaze. It was like being examined, not for threat, but for something deeper, something vital. Their encounters multiplied over the following days. The relay in the training hall, a gravity field that needed tuning, a reflex drone out of alignment. Each fault became an excuse for Marcus to linger. Each repair a chance to observe her in the space between violence and calm. He watched her study the diagnostic hollows, her long fingers poised in thoughtful stillness, her frilled neck occasionally flaring in concentration or irritation. Sometimes, she would ask a terse question. Other times, she watched in silence, and Marcus felt the air between them thicken with unspoken things. One evening, the dim light of the simulator chamber pooled around them, softening the edges of metal and scale alike. Marcus stood close behind her, calibrating the interface. His hands hovered near hers, careful not to brush against her skin, but close enough that the heat of her radiated through the air. "The feedback lag is 2.7 milliseconds, he murmured, voice steady despite the nearness. "Enough to cost you a block." She finished his sentence, her tone even but her frilled neck brushing his arm. The contact sent a thrill through him, sharp and unexpected. He could not help but glance at her, meeting the golden intensity of her gaze. Something flickered there, recognition, challenge, curiosity. They moved through the sequence together, breath and data mingling. The wall between them, so carefully maintained, began to falter. It was she who broke the silence as the session wound down, her voice softer than before. Describe your homeworld. Marcus hesitated, searching for a safe answer, but found himself caught by her analytical gaze. She studied him, as if she could decode the secrets he kept just by watching the muscles in his jaw, the flicker of his eyes. He evaded with a half-smile, but the question lingered, drawing the air taut between them, charged with what neither would say. He had always been invisible here, just another tech, hands and tools and silence. But now, under the scrutiny of her unblinking eyes and the shimmer of her scales, Marcus found himself illuminated. For the first time, he wondered what it might mean to be seen. Marcus's chance arrived disguised as a facility-wide software overhaul, one of those rare orchestrated windows when chaos became cover. While his colleagues huddled over surface-level protocols and the approved update scripts, he slipped away, badge pinging him from sector to sector with the plausible purpose of deep systems calibration. The whir of server racks and the antiseptic chill of the subcore welcomed him deeper into Veyron's digital heart. Sweat beaded at his brow, though the air was cold. His hands were steady as he bypassed firewalls, each line of code a silent trespass. His true assignment, hidden even from those who thought they'd recruited him, was to hunt for evidence that could dismantle the syndicate. He moved through layers of encryption, all the while listening for footsteps, a stray cough, the soft click of boots on composite tile. Most of the logs were standard: fight scheduling, supply requisitions, personnel files. Then, nestled deep in a partition masked as a coolant control directory, he found it. A dossier, marked in a cipher that made his heart seize. Embedded Alliance agents, names, movements, message relays, enough to topple the regime, enough to burn Veyron to the ground. His throat tightened. The magnitude of it threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced his breathing slow, methodical. He began copying the files to a shard drive, watching the progress bar crawl across the interface. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Then, a klaxon shrieked, raw, urgent, and not part of any drill. Red strobes erupted, washing the subcore in bloody light. His fingers danced across the console, trying to abort the transfer, but the system was already locking down. Unauthorized access detected in Core B, an automated voice blared overhead. Security response en route. Marcus yanked the drive free and ran. Boots hammered the corridor outside. The doors to the core slid open, blinding white light framing armored silhouettes. He ducked, feinted left, almost made it past. A shock baton caught him behind the ear, hard enough to drop him. Stars exploded in his vision. He lashed out, catching a guard's arm, twisting, but there were too many. Pain bloomed in his ribs, his shoulder, his jaw. The world buckled around him, the taste of copper sharp on his tongue. Another blow, crackling, final, drove him down into darkness. When he surfaced, the world was a storm of pain and light. He was on his knees, wrists bound behind his back, head throbbing with every heartbeat. The chamber was cold, gilded in shadow. Before him, on a dais of black glass, sat Cadron, the syndicate lord. Cadron's face was a mask of practiced amusement, lips curled in a smile that never reached his eyes. "So," Cadron drawled, voice echoing off marble and metal, "the quiet one had teeth, and fangs sharp enough to wound us all." Marcus said nothing. His vision swam, blood sticky at his temple. "You know the penalty for treason, technician." Cadron's fingers drummed a lazy rhythm on the armrest. "But I find poetic justice more satisfying. You will die in the arena, by the hand of our champion. Let the crowd see the cost of betrayal." Marcus swallowed, the words falling like stones. In the preparation chamber, Sareth stood motionless as Kadrin delivered the command. Her scales glimmered in the half-light, unreadable. She bowed her head, the very image of submission, her voice a cold blade. "As you command, my lord." But the instant Kadrin withdrew, the stillness shattered. Sareth's fist slammed into a steel bench, bending the metal with a shriek. She let out a guttural hiss, frills flaring wide, then stared at her reflection in the mirror. Amber eyes rimmed with anger and something darker. Not a victor, but a caged creature. She saw herself as the world did, an instrument, a killer, nothing more. She pressed trembling fingers to the glass, remembering the flicker in Marcus's gaze, the way he had looked at her and seen past the scales, past the legend. She drew a shuddering breath, rage and grief colliding inside her. She was trapped, forced to destroy the only one who'd ever glimpsed her true self. On the day of execution, the Colosseum was a living storm. Marcus was dragged through the bowels of the arena, wrists bound, vision blurry but defiant. The roar of the crowd grew with every step, a cacophony of bloodlust, 1,000 voices chanting Sareth's name. The obsidian sand burned his knees as he was forced to kneel in the center, spotlights searing down. Across the arena, gates thundered open. Sareth emerged in full regalia, armored plates forged to her form, scales rippling with iridescent fire in the sunlight. Her gait was measured, predatory. The crowd shrieked, stamping for blood. Marcus met her gaze. Beneath the war paint and regalia, her eyes flickered with something he recognized: regret, apology, warning. She circled him slowly, blades drawn, every movement a calculated spectacle. The syndicate enforcers watched from the catwalks above, weapons at the ready. The sand shifted beneath her feet. Then, with a motion so swift the crowd gasped, Sareth dropped her blades. The clang rang out, sharp and shocking. She turned from Marcus, presenting her back to the entire arena. A gesture of surrender, of refusal. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. Cries of outrage, shouts of betrayal, blaster bolts firing as Sareth's loyalists, fighters and staff who owed her their lives, rose up against Kadrin's enforcers. Smoke grenades blossomed, obscuring the stands. Marcus ducked as a stun round scorched the sand beside him. Sareth spun, her movements all lethal intent, and slashed through his bonds with a blade she'd concealed in her gauntlet. She pulled him upright, her grip iron on his forearm. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice urgent, her gaze never wavering. They plunged into the maelstrom. Together they dodged enforcers, Sareth carving a path through the chaos with Marcus at her side. A blast rattled the pillar ahead. Sareth shoved Marcus behind it, shielding him from debris. He caught her wrist, desperate. "Why risk this?" he shouted, his voice ragged over the din. She spun, pinning him against the pillar, her body pressed close, scales hot and alive beneath the armor. Her eyes blazed, no longer cold, but fierce and unguarded. "I recognized you from the start," she hissed, breath hot against his cheek. "I intended to use your extraction as my own escape route. Your capture ruined everything. This wasn't the plan." For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the heat between them. The truth, the betrayal, the fragile hope. Above, the Colosseum burned, but neither looked away. On the run in the neon maze of the outer docks, their roles shifted with the current. The city was a blur of maglev lines, rain-slicked walkways, and holographic signs advertising pleasures and poisons in every tongue. Marcus led now, head down, eyes flicking from security feeds to hidden alcoves, mind racing with possibilities. Sareth pressed close at his back, her senses stretched taut, every muscle coiled, amber eyes constantly scanning for danger. Where Marcus once lingered in her shadow, now she guarded his, a silent sentinel. "Kadrin's bounty is everywhere," Marcus muttered, voice barely more than breath. He pulled Sareth behind crates stacked with unfamiliar fruit, the sweet chemical scent barely masking the stench of fear and diesel. Facial recognition nodes, patrols. We need new identities. Now. Sareth's jaw tightened, her frilled neck flaring. I can handle any patrol, she said, voice low and dangerous. We need to not be seen at all, Marcus replied, already working his slate, fingertips flying. Give me 2 minutes. She stood over him, a living wall. The crowd shifted around them, humans and off-worlders pressing close, oblivious to the war simmering beneath their feet. Marcus's heart hammered as he broke through the dockmaster's registry, splicing false records into the manifest. 2 off-shift cargo techs, credentials set to expire at dawn. He pressed a chip into Sareth's palm. You're near a Kess now. Smile if anyone asks. Sareth's mouth twisted. Smiling is not my strength. It's the thought that counts. He risked a small, crooked smile of his own. She watched him for a heartbeat, then nodded. Where to? He scanned the glowing maze. North Market. If we make it through, I know a way off station. But nothing in Veyron moved unseen for long. They barely made it halfway down a market alley, past noodle carts, spice stalls, the glittering fins of synthfish, before Marcus spotted the shadow moving wrong against the shifting lights. His pulse spiked. Ambush! He hissed. They spun as a pack of Kadron's hunters surged from the press. Sareth's claws flashed, slicing through the first attacker, her movements a blur of muscle and scale. Blaster fire ripped the air. The crowd screamed, stampeding in panic. Marcus ducked, rolling behind a vendor's table. Smoke out, he shouted, slapping a canister against the stall. Hissing plumes billowed, swallowing everything in gray haze. He reached blindly, fingers closing around Sareth's wrist. This way, he yelled, pulling her into the surge of bodies, letting the mob carry them away from the gunfire. Sareth kept pace, her grip bruising, her other hand slashing at anything that got too close. They broke from the chaos, lungs burning, into a narrow service corridor. Marcus slammed the emergency hatch shut behind them, heart in his throat. We need to move. Dock control will lock down the sector, he gasped. Sareth wiped blood from her arm, her breath steady. You navigate. I protect. They ran, weaving through shadows and forgotten alleys until Marcus found what he needed. An unmanned freight pod, its destination scrawled in grease on the hull. He keyed in their fake IDs, praying the system's security was as bad as he remembered. The hatch hissed open. In, he said. Sareth ducked inside, followed by Marcus. The pod was little more than a metal coffin, stacks of crates for company and darkness pressing in. The hatch sealed, the pod lurched, then rattled free of the dock, plunging them into the shipping lanes toward the rim. Silence settled, thick and heavy. Only their breathing and the distant hum of the engine filled the space. Marcus sat, knees to chest, every muscle still trembling from adrenaline. He found Sareth in the gloom. She was coiled on her haunches, hands fisted in her lap, scales flickering with agitation. Are you hurt? He whispered. No, she replied, voice barely above a rasp. He reached for her, drawn by a need that had nothing to do with safety. She met him halfway, her mouth crushing his, fierce and unyielding. The kiss was a collision of fear, relief, longing, and weeks of tension held at bay by circumstance. She was stronger. He felt the heat of her, the power barely contained. For a moment, he was overwhelmed, pinned against the crate, breath stolen. Then she yielded, arms winding around his neck, pulling him close until his body melted against hers, until the world outside the pod ceased to exist. After, their silence was gentler, breathless. He pressed his forehead to hers. We'll make it, he murmured. She closed her eyes, one claw tracing his jaw. We must. They found refuge in a cramped safe house above a noodle stall, the air thick with steam and frying oil. Marcus watched the world from behind threadbare curtains, while Sareth cleaned her blades at the rickety table, eyes half-lidded in thought. He broke the silence first. I was just a tool, wasn't I? His voice was raw, not accusing, only tired. Sareth didn't look up. She worked the cloth over her blade, every motion deliberate. At first, yes, you were a means to open my cage. He swallowed, throat tight. She set the blade aside, fingers curling. But you changed that. My feelings changed everything. He moved to sit beside her. Why? She met his gaze then, amber eyes unguarded. I didn't surrender for a tool, Marcus. I surrendered for you. The words landed like a promise, fragile and astonishing. He reached for her hand, and she took it, scales cool and alive beneath his skin. For the first time, there was no mask, no legend, only two souls, alone against the dark. Their calm lasted only until nightfall. Rain battered the roof, and Marcus had almost drifted to sleep when he heard it, a coded knock at the door. He stiffened, every nerve alert. Sareth had her blade drawn before he moved. A familiar voice hissed through the calm. Open up, Marcus. We know you're in there. His blood ran cold. Lyra, his handler, he cursed under his breath. They think you turned me, he whispered. They're not here to negotiate. Sareth's eyes narrowed. We end them. No, no more killing, not if we can help it. He searched the tiny room, mind racing. Vents. Now. She hesitated, but he was already moving, pushing aside crates, unscrewing the duct panel. Footsteps pounded on the stairs. He shoved Sareth up first, then followed, dragging the grate back into place just as the door burst open below. The vents were cramped, the air metallic and thick with dust. Marcus led the way, counting turns, mapping the building's blueprints in his mind. Below, voices barked orders, Lyra's and others, hunting, methodical. They reached the roof, rain lashing their faces, city lights stretching to infinity. The retrieval team was already moving, thermal scopes, comms, all state-of-the-art. Marcus spotted a power relay at the edge of the roof, its panel open for maintenance. He grinned, soaked and wild with adrenaline. Time for some fireworks, he said. Sareth nodded, sliding into the shadows. I'll draw them off. She darted across the slick roof, her movements a blur. The team's attention shifted. Marcus ripped open the relay, rerouted the circuits, and primed the EMP charge from a scavenged device in his pack. Sparks danced at his fingertips. Now, he shouted. Sareth hurled a broken antenna, shattering a spotlight. The team's sensors glitched, night vision flaring out. Marcus triggered the EMP. Blue light arced across the roof, frying every system. Shouts erupted as gear and comms went dead. The Alliance team suddenly blind and frozen. He grabbed Sareth's hand, hearts pounding, and together they vanished into the night, outmaneuvering Syndicate and Alliance alike, fugitives bound only to each other. Hidden in the bowels of an abandoned hauler, Marcus hunched over a scavenged terminal, the faint blue glow painting the hollow cargo bay in ghostly hues. Loose wiring dangled from the ceiling, and the stale air reeked of rust and old coolant. Sareth stood near the loading ramp, silent and watchful, eyes fixed on the gloom outside. Every creak of the ancient hull, every distant clang, set her frills twitching. Marcus's fingers danced over the keys, scrolling through the trove of stolen data, heart hammering with a mix of dread and hope. We can't keep running, he said finally, voice low, weighted. There's only one way out now. Sareth's gaze slid to him, wary but unflinching. What do you propose? He hesitated, meeting her eyes. We hit the Lhasa, Kadron's fortress world. We get inside, reach the data core, and broadcast everything, every name, every crime, every secret, across the galaxy. After that, there'll be nowhere left for him to hide. Sareth's frills shivered, her arms folding across her chest. That world is a tomb for enemies. You know this. I do, he said, pushing back from the terminal. But I also know their protocols. I spent years in those networks. I can get us inside, ghost us past sensors, lock down sectors as we move. He drew a shaky breath, then looked up. But I can't handle the flesh and blood part. That's you. She held his gaze, her expression unreadable. You trust me with your life. I already have, he said softly. Their plan unfolded over the next hours, a tight, desperate weaving of Marcus's technical knowledge and Sereth's lethal precision. He mapped out entry points, the schedule of patrols, the rhythms of shift changes. She quizzed him on guard patterns, weaknesses in the fortress's design, and the likely placement of syndicate loyalists. Their trust was absolute. In the lull between preparations, Marcus watched her check her blades, shoulders coiled with tension, every movement a study in controlled violence. He felt a fierce pride at her side, at what they had become together, forged by fire and necessity. That night, as silence fell over the battered hauler, a rare calm settled between them. The galaxy outside was a velvet expanse, stars hanging like distant lanterns. Sereth stood by the rusted viewport, scales glowing faintly in the starlight, her posture uncharacteristically unguarded. Marcus approached quietly, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder, drawing her warmth into his bones. She leaned back into him, eyes distant, expression softening. "Are you afraid?" he murmured. She was silent for a long moment, then answered, voice quiet and resonant. "Fear is always near, but with you, it is quiet." He kissed the side of her neck, the gesture tender. She turned in his arms, her claws gentle as she cupped his face. "If we do this," she said, "it will be the first time I fight for myself. For us." Their kiss was slow, sure, a silent vow shared in the hush of the dark. For a heartbeat, the rest of the universe faded away. Infiltrating Thalassa was a symphony of risk and timing. They breached the outer shield on a maintenance skiff, cloaked by a false signal Marcus piped through a relay. As they slipped through the labyrinthine corridors, Marcus kept his eyes on the security feed, voice urgent in Sereth's earpiece. "Left at the next junction, guard post ahead, 3 sentries." Sereth melted into the shadows, moving with impossible grace. The first guard never saw her coming. One swift strike, silent and final. The next 2 fell before they could raise the alarm. Marcus watched the blips vanish from his schematic, awe mingling with fear. They moved in perfect tandem. Marcus rerouted cameras and disabled laser tripwires, his pulse racing each time the system's warning lights blinked amber. Sereth cleared the path. Her presence felt more than seen, every step a calculated promise. They neared the data core, a vault at the heart of the fortress, ringed with armed patrols and retina-locked doors. Marcus slid a splicer into the lock, heart pounding. "Give me 30 seconds." Sereth pressed herself to the wall, eyes narrowed, blade ready. Footsteps echoed beyond the bulkhead. A guard rounded the corner, and Sereth caught him by the throat, easing him silently to the floor. The vault door hissed open. Marcus ducked inside, adrenaline roaring in his veins. The data core thrummed with energy, a cathedral of light and computation. He dove to the main terminal, slotting in the drive. Outside, Sereth paced the perimeter, senses stretched to breaking. The moment the progress bar hit 100, alarms blared. The upload triggered an automatic security purge. Red strobes painted the walls. The inner doors slammed open. Kadrin burst through, towering in powered armor, eyes blazing with hatred. Syndicate insignia burned on his chest, the air crackling with the hum of energy shields. "Traitors!" he roared. "You think you can steal my empire?" Sereth stepped between Kadrin and Marcus, claws unsheathed, her silhouette lit by the flickering emergency lights. Kadrin charged, the floor trembling beneath his boots. Sereth darted forward, her movements a blur. She dodged the first blow, ducked under a wild swing, and slashed at the joints in his armor. Sparks flew, but Cadron's gauntlet caught her in the ribs, hurling her across the room. Marcus scrambled for the cryogenic controls. Sereth! Distract him! She lunged again, weaving between hammering fists, her agility matching his brute strength. Cadron roared, swinging wide, smashing consoles into wreckage. For a breathless instant, Sereth vaulted over his shoulder, claws raking at the armor's control panel. Marcus triggered the cryoburst. Jets of icy vapor exploded from the vents, engulfing Cadron. Frost formed across his suit, servos grinding to a halt as the temperature plummeted. Sereth seized her moment. She drove her blade into the chink of frozen metal at Cadron's throat. The armor buckled, energy bleeding away in a dying wail. Cadron collapsed, final breath a snarl. For a moment, the only sound was the whine of dying systems and the hammer of Marcus's heart. The Alliance arrived in force, storming the ruined core. Marcus and Sereth were ringed by armored Marines, but the transmission had already gone out, every screen in the sector lit with Cadron's crimes. Marcus was cleared of all charges. Sereth, by his side, was granted sanctuary at his request. The Syndicate fell, its shadow finally lifted. Later, on the bridge of a small courier ship, a gift from the grateful Alliance, Sereth leaned into Marcus's embrace. The viewport framed the glittering expanse of open space, the arena's roar and the weight of captivity at last behind them. Marcus pressed a kiss to her temple. She smiled, her frilled neck relaxed, and together they watched the stars, free at last. They drifted for months, ghosts on forgotten trade routes. The courier ship moved like a rumor between the stars, skimming past abandoned way stations and silent wrecks, always a system or two ahead of old enemies and old debts. The galaxy was vast, its violence far away at last, and the space between Marcus and Sereth slowly filled with things unspoken and things unlearned. They settled on Lysara, a quiet, unclaimed world, ringed by green mountains and silver water. Their new home stood on a bluff above a crystal lake, a modest dwelling of local stone and salvaged alloy, the roof angled against the wind, windows wide to the sun. It was the kind of place Marcus had never dared to imagine, not in the fevered nights of escape, not in the crowded alleys of Veyron, or the endless corridors of ships. It was a place with no alarms, no crowds, no secrets. Marcus stood on the porch one cool evening, hands in his pockets, watching Sereth at the lakeshore below. Her blades were stowed now, left inside with her old armor, gathering dust. She moved with a different grace, no longer the coiled tension of a gladiator, but the slow, unhurried rhythm of someone learning to breathe in peace. She crouched by the water's edge, examining a smooth stone with the same focused intensity she once reserved for combat. The light played over her iridescent scales, shifting blues and violets across her bare shoulders. Marcus smiled to himself, catching her in that private moment of discovery, how she traced the cool stone, weighed it in her palm, and rolled it back into the shallows, watching the ripples with quiet fascination. She was learning to be someone, not something. He loved her all the more for it. Inside, the aroma of Marcus's cooking filled the small house. He diced root vegetables, adapting a simple stew recipe from his childhood to the alien bounty Lysara offered. Sereth lingered in the doorway, arms folded, head tilted in bemusement. "Why do you do this?" she asked, voice gentle. "You could eat the rations. It is efficient." He grinned, stirring the pot. "Because this is home. Back on my world, we cook to mark the end of a day, to make a place feel safe. I want that here." She watched, utterly absorbed, as he tasted the broth, wrinkled his nose, then sprinkled in a handful of sun-green herbs. "You change the recipe every time." "The ingredients change," he replied, meeting her gaze. "So I adapt." Sereth's frilled neck fluttered, a sign he'd come to read as amusement. "I wish to learn this, the making of food." He handed her a knife and a bowl of pale fruit. "Here, slice these thin, like this." She mimicked his motions, slow at first, then more confident. They worked side by side, her focus unwavering, her hands precise. When she tasted the finished stew, her eyes widened at the newness of it. "It is bright, warm. I think I understand." That night, after the meal, they sat on the porch in companionable silence. The sky was deep indigo, stars blazing. Marcus leaned back in the old chair he'd repaired, legs stretched out, contentment settling in his bones. He felt her presence before he saw her. Sereth moved behind him, arms slipping around his waist, her cheek resting against his shoulder. "Your thoughts are loud tonight," she murmured, her voice a soft rumble. He reached up, covering her hands with his. "No alarms, no crowds, no secrets," he said quietly, letting the words fill the night. "Just you. Just this." She was silent for a while, her embrace steady. But when she spoke again, her voice carried an old ache. "There are times when the quiet is heavy. I am still haunted by the absence of purpose. All my life, I was made for a cause. A weapon is only at peace in its purpose." He squeezed her hands gently, grounding her. "Our purpose is this, just this. Waking up together, eating meals that never turn out quite right, learning what it means to choose, every day." She exhaled, slow and deep, the tension bleeding from her frame. "With you, the quiet is not empty." Later, inside, she beckoned him to the center of their living room. The furniture was sparse, the floor smooth and open. She wore a loose wrap, her feet bare. "Come, I will teach you the meditative forms of my people." He hesitated, but she smiled, coaxing him forward. "It is not fighting, not here." She began a flowing sequence of movements, arms tracing arcs, feet gliding over the floor. She guided his stance, her touch gentle but sure, correcting his balance, realigning his posture. Her presence was electric, a current that ran from her fingertips to his skin, waking parts of him that had only known tension or urgency. "Breathe," she whispered. "Not from the chest, from the core." He tried, and she pressed her palm lightly to his stomach, steadying him. He relaxed into her hold, trusting her to lead. The movements became a dialogue, bodies swaying in harmony, their silence filled with meaning. Her low, thrumming purr resonated against his back, a sound she made only for him, a mark of trust deeper than desire. She spun him to face her, eyes luminous in the half-light. "You are learning," she said, pride and affection mingling in her tone. He brushed a stray scale from her cheek, the gesture reverent. "Only because my teacher is patient." Their kiss was slow and certain, an affirmation of the quiet love they had found, a love built not on adrenaline or danger, but on the daily choice to share the stillness, to be more than what the world had made of them. In each other's arms, they found the answer to all the questions the galaxy had ever thrown their way. Just this. Their peace was interrupted by a chime, a sharp staccato pattern that Marcus hadn't heard in months. He paused, knife poised over a half-sliced root on the kitchen counter. Sereth, at the window, went utterly still, frills flaring, every sense sharpened in an instant. The comm unit blinked from the shelf, the glow a deep, pulsing blue. Encrypted. Marcus wiped his hands on a towel, the calm of their exile slipping away like mist. He activated the message. Lyra's voice filtered through, encoded but unmistakable. "Marcus Vey, Sereth, full exoneration confirmed by Alliance High Council. Your records are sealed. No further pursuit authorized. The Alliance wishes to extend a formal offer. Marcus, a post at the Academy as senior strategist, with full security clearance and command over a new defense program. Sereth, an invitation to consult on combat doctrine, help train a generation of officers, details attached. Your skills are needed, And your service honored. Respond at your discretion. Silence fell, heavy and expectant. Marcus turned the words over in his mind, then glanced at Sereth. She moved from the window, her steps measured, expression unreadable. He played the message again, slower this time, letting every word settle in the quiet of their home. The idea of returning, of rooms filled with voices and strategy hollows, of war games and endless calculations, gnawed at him. He looked at Sereth, half expecting her to leap at the chance, to reclaim a place of importance. She stood by the table, head tilted, watching him as if she could read every thought racing behind his eyes. He broke the silence first, voice tense. "They want to put you in a cage," he said. "A different one, but still a cage." Sereth's gaze flickered to the comm, then back to him. She sat, folding her arms on the table. "They offer me a title, a role I was taught to crave." Her voice was quiet, reflective. "The champion would have accepted. I would have seen it as my destiny. But I am no longer just a champion." Marcus let out a shaky breath, sitting across from her. "You could have anything you want now. Respect. Power. Purpose." "Purpose," she echoed, the word tasting strange in her mouth. She was silent for a long moment, then lifted her gaze to his. "What do you want, Marcus?" He faltered, caught off guard. For so long, his wants had been as simple as survival, a place to sleep, a way out, her safety. He tried to imagine the life Lyra was offering, crisp uniforms, polished halls, a mission that stretched beyond the horizon. The old longing flickered, then faded, replaced by something gentler, more rooted. "I thought I'd lost my life," he admitted. "But it's right here. With you. This is more than I ever let myself want." Sereth leaned forward, her touch featherlight as she framed his face with her hands. Her claws, once weapons, were careful now, reverent. "What Kadrin and the Alliance never understood," she murmured, "is that a human's greatest strength isn't cunning or tactics. It's the ability to build, to make a home where none existed." He closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her words sink deep. "They're offering us everything we once thought we needed. But we don't need it, do we?" She shook her head, a small, certain smile curling at the corner of her mouth. "We have already won." Marcus reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. "We could answer. We could go back." "We could," she agreed. "Or we could let the message wait. Let them wonder what became of the champion and the strategist." He laughed, a quiet sound full of relief and wonder. "Let's make them wait." The comm sat silent on the table, the offer untouched. That evening, as dusk surrendered to night, they carried a blanket to the porch. The twin suns of Lysara hung low over the water, painting the world in molten gold and rose. Marcus wrapped an arm around Sereth's shoulders, drawing her close. She rested her head on his shoulder, scales warm against his skin. They sat in easy silence, watching the horizon. The world was quiet but alive. Insects chirred, wind stirred the grass. A flock of pale-winged birds wheeled above the distant trees. Marcus felt the tension that had haunted his bones for years begin to dissolve. He breathed in the scent of her, the promise of tomorrow. Sereth shifted, her hand finding his. "You are at peace," she said, tone half question, half certainty. "For the first time," he replied, squeezing her fingers gently. She closed her eyes, and for a moment he felt her trembling, not with fear, but with the enormity of being free. "I used to think the arena was the only place I could prove myself. Now, every day I wake beside you is a victory." He pressed his lips to her forehead, letting the truth of that settle between them. The stars brightened as night deepened, the twin suns slipping behind the far ridge. They had faced empires, armies, and the darkness within themselves. But in this quiet dawn, with hands entwined and her head on his shoulder, Marcus understood this was their true triumph, not in war, but in the peace they had claimed together. They watched the sky brighten, promise blooming on the horizon. The future was unknown, but it was theirs. Every morning, every moment, chosen side by side. Not an ending, but a beginning. Our story ends here. If you'd like to support us, you can use the Super Thanks button right under the video to leave a tip. It truly helps our team improve the quality of our work. We're grateful to each and every subscriber for being with us. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.